It's terrible. My sister's in the hospital. She's in pretty bad shape, so I'm gonna head back home for a few days. My husband told me over the phone in a panicked voice. However, my sister-in-law is right in front of me. I started to panic a little, wondering what on earth my husband was talking about. Hey, are you listening? Hello? I hear my husband's voice urging me to respond. Then my sister-in-law smiled mischievously. Well, it's time to teach that hopeless guy a lesson. Let's just end this call for now. My name's Emily. I'm a 40-year-old working in the secretarial department of a big company. I met my husband Jason at the company's party. Jason was working in a different department of the same company at the time, and we first met at an event I organized. Nice to meet you. I'm Jason. This event you planned is really fun. Jason approached me cheerfully. Thank you. I'm usually behind the scenes, so I'm a bit nervous being out front. I responded with a smile. As we kept running into each other at company events, we naturally grew closer. Jason had a kind personality that valued family, and I was drawn to his warm character. Jason, I heard your recent project proposal was well received. The CEO was really pleased. I said to him one day as we had lunch together during our break. Oh, really? That's great to hear. But knowing you're happy about it makes me want to work even harder. Jason said, looking a bit embarrassed, and we laughed together. After we started dating, we spent more time together and had more chances to talk deeply about our values and future. Even though we were both busy with work, Jason always showed his support. Emily, I know it's tough, but I'm here for you. Let's work hard together. Jason said one night as we gazed at the stars, holding my hand. Thanks, Jason. With you by my side, I can keep going. I gently squeezed his hand back. We decided to get married 2 years after we started dating. It came up naturally, and we both agreed on building a family together. Emily, let's be together forever. Let's support each other as a family. I was so happy when Jason proposed like that. Yes, I promise. With you, Jason, I feel like we can overcome any challenge. I answered with tears in my eyes. So we got married. After the wedding, we divided our roles with me working outside and Jason taking care of the household chores. Jason's personality and his strong sense of family seemed perfect for being a full-time homemaker. We took pride in our roles and supported each other, living a happy family life. A few years later, our daughter Megan and son Kevin were born, making us a family of 4. My husband supported me and the kids as a full-time homemaker. But recently, our family has seen a new change. When the kids started elementary school and became more independent, my husband decided to start working outside the home. However, the job he chose wasn't just a part-time gig. Jason started working at a long-established local garden center. This was his first step towards his old dream of becoming a botanist. You know, you've supported me so much all this time. Now it's my turn to help out more at home and support your dream. I said. Jason had studied in a horticulture department at university, so he had deep knowledge and passion for it, but he had put that path on hold for our marriage and family. But now that the kids were in school, he finally had time for himself and decided to pursue that path. Thanks, Emily. I'm still on probation, but there's so much to learn here. Eventually, I want to have my own plant shop. Jason said with shining eyes over breakfast. Looking at Jason's face, I could feel that his determination and joy were genuine. That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you for taking steps towards your dream. I'll adjust my work schedule and we'll share more of the housework. I suggested. Jason expressed his gratitude and said, "It's because of your support that I can move forward with confidence. Let's keep supporting each other and building a wonderful family." We hugged each other tightly. Listening to my husband enthusiastically talk about the plant knowledge he learned at his new workplace, I got to know a new side of him, feeling fresh surprise and joy each time. As a couple, we felt ourselves growing stronger as a family while supporting each other's growth. However, being able to feel this happiness as a family seems like a miracle. The reason is that when we got married, my husband's family didn't accept our relationship. My husband's family home is a 2-hour ride away, where his father and older sister live. My husband told me this. My mom got really sick when I was in college and passed away a few years later, he said, looking down, seeming pained to talk about it. My husband continued, struggling with his words but slowly raising his face to look me in the eyes. I remember his eyes were slightly watery. Dad and sis have old-fashioned ideas. I don't think they'll understand our way of being a couple. I'm sorry. Hearing my husband speak so painfully, we decided to just register our marriage without having a wedding ceremony or reception. There were other reasons behind this decision too. My husband had no savings, and I was busy with work. Also, thinking about having kids in the future, we wanted to keep the wedding costs as low as possible. So my husband moved into my place, and we focused on saving money for about 3 years after getting married. As a result, once we had some financial cushion, I gave birth to our daughter and son. I returned to work right after giving birth, leaving the household chores to my husband. But it seems my sister-in-law didn't approve of our couple style. And my husband relayed her words to me without any hesitation. The other day, I got a call from sis. She grilled me pretty hard about how long I was gonna keep doing the housework. I quietly sighed at my husband's words. I think every family has its own way of doing things. I once heard from my husband that his sister is single, now living with her father at his family home. That doesn't bother me, but that's exactly why I don't want her interfering with our family. My husband went on to proudly tell me that his sister had said it wasn't right for me, his wife, to work outside the home. Hey, Jason, don't you think I should have a good talk with your sister? I suggested, feeling a bit uneasy about my husband's words. Then my husband, looking a bit flustered, said, "No, that's not a good idea. Sis doesn't seem to think too highly of you, Emily. So if you actually talk to her, I think she might say something rude to you. It hurts me to think about that. So I'll be the go-between with sis, don't worry about it." My husband pleaded with me, lowering his eyebrows apologetically. Seeing my husband's sad face, I felt a pang in my chest. Since we first met, I've always been weak to his puppy dog expression. All right. If that's what you want, I won't contact your sister. And so, I lost touch with my sister-in-law and father-in-law, becoming estranged from my husband's family. Before I knew it, almost 15 years had passed since I married my husband, with hardly any interaction with his family. Even so, I believed my married life with my husband was going well. But since he started working at the garden center, I feel like things have been changing bit by bit. I'm working all day to learn about management. Saying that, my husband started slacking off on housework. Moreover, my husband has been coming home late from work every day. Still, I wanted to support my husband's dream, so I decided to share the housework with the kids to support him. Our 12-year-old daughter has become capable of doing more things and has started taking on some of her father's chores. However, despite my husband's increased working hours, his salary remained low. When I felt something was really off and questioned him about it, my husband angrily retorted, "I'm learning all about garden center management at that store. Didn't you say you'd support my dream, Emily? Don't get in my way." I was shocked to be yelled at with a tone I'd never heard before. I couldn't help but purse my lips. Seeing me go silent, my husband, for some reason, said to me with satisfaction, "By the way, my sis gave me grief again. She asked how long I'm gonna keep my husband doing nothing. I'm working like this to open a garden center, so it's about time I became the breadwinner." I couldn't believe my ears at my husband's sudden declaration. What breadwinner? I'm still the one supporting this family's finances. I'm fed up with my husband's and his sister's words as he reports them. And I felt that someday, I'd need to clear up his sister's misunderstanding. One day, as I continued to worry about my sister-in-law, I unexpectedly ended up meeting her through work. That day, I was attending a meeting with my boss for a new client, an advertising design company. During the exchange of business cards, I couldn't help but let out a gasp. Seeing me, usually calm in any situation, raise my voice, my boss looked at me with a surprised face. Everyone in the conference room turned their eyes to me, and my gaze met with one woman's. She also exclaimed, "Oh." The client's outburst caused a stir among those around us. "Oh, I'm sorry. Actually." As I stumbled over my words, the woman energetically answered, "This lady is actually my brother's wife." Hearing this, my boss's face brightened, and he said to my sister-in-law, "What a coincidence. She's always been a great help to us. It's an honor to meet a relative of hers in a place like this." My boss said with a beaming smile, "How about it? Why don't you two go out for a meal together?" Unable to refuse my boss's friendly suggestion, I nodded vaguely. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law cheerfully agreed. "Yes, I'd be delighted. Let's definitely go." And so, from this chance encounter, I ended up having a meal with my sister-in-law. After eating a little, my boss said, "You probably have a lot to talk about as relatives, so you can finish work for today if you'd like." I reluctantly took him up on his offer, and after the meal, I went to a cafe with my sister-in-law to have a thorough talk. I was prepared to be criticized by my sister-in-law once we were alone, but as we talked, I realized it was all a misunderstanding. "I've been wanting to have a proper talk with you, Emily. I felt there might be some misunderstanding." I couldn't sense any ill will towards me in my sister-in-law's words. It was completely different from the image of her I'd gotten from my husband, and I was surprised. "Actually, I've been thinking the same thing. I tried to discuss it with my husband, but he kept stopping me." I decided to tell my sister-in-law about everything I'd heard from my husband. As I did, her face clouded over. "To tell you the truth, I heard from Jason that you were saying bad things about me. But I thought that couldn't be right." My sister-in-law and I couldn't help but look at each other. So, my husband had been lying to both of us to keep us estranged. But why would he do such a thing? With this question in mind, I decided to talk more in-depth with my sister-in-law. As a result, it became clear that my husband had been manipulating information to suit himself with both me and his sister. This meant that we had been jerked around by my husband's lies for 15 years. As I was dumbfounded by this fact, I suddenly got a call from my husband on my phone. Surprised by his sudden contact, I couldn't believe what I heard next. "It's terrible, my sister's in the hospital. She's in pretty bad shape, so I'm gonna head back home for a few days," my husband told me over the phone in a panicked voice. However, my sister-in-law is right in front of me. I started to panic a little, wondering what on earth my husband was talking about. Unaware of the situation, my husband continued with more unbelievable words. "I'm supporting my sis, so make sure you do the housework as I told you until I get back." My husband talking down to me like that. His words made me angry, and I was about to argue back when my sister-in-law put her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Wait a minute, I've got a good idea." "What do you mean?" I asked my sister-in-law in a low voice while lightly covering the phone. "Hey, you listening? Hello?" I hear my husband's voice urging me to respond. Then my sister-in-law smiled mischievously. "Well, it's time to teach that hopeless guy a lesson. Let's just end this call for now." "Okay." I put the phone back to my ear. "Sorry. I was in a meeting and had to step out." Work when your husband's family is in crisis? You really don't care about my family, do you? I was about to argue back again, but I held myself back. "I'm sorry, I'll do the housework properly. I hope your sister is okay." "That's right, you should have said that from the start." "Well, bye. Things are pretty rough here, so I might not be able to contact you." "All right. I won't contact you either." With that, I hung up the phone. After catching my breath after the call, my sister-in-law revealed hidden truths about my husband. Hearing her story, I reflected on my life with my husband and felt deeply disappointed. If what my sister-in-law was saying was true, It meant I had been deceived by my husband for the entire 15 years of our marriage. Realizing this, I felt anger welling up inside me. My husband's betrayal must be true, as my sister-in-law said. Thinking that I must put an end to this false married life, I decided to take action according to my sister-in-law's plan. After that, an event that could be called tragic for my unfaithful husband occurred. Having made preparations for this, my sister-in-law and I waited for contact from my husband. A few days later, when my husband came home in a rush, I presented him with divorce papers, just as my sister-in-law had planned. "Welcome home. Here, divorce papers. Sign them right now, right here." My husband, groaning in shock, began to tell me unbelievable lies. "Wait a minute, divorce papers? What's this all about? What have I done? Why are you suddenly presenting me with divorce papers?" My husband was initially surprised, then gradually became angry. Looking at him coldly, I quietly said, "Your sister being in the hospital was a lie, wasn't it?" "Huh? You know, when you contacted me, I was with your sister." "That's impossible." "It's true. I was in a meeting with a client, and your sister worked for that client. When you called, we were having tea at a cafe together." "Oh man, are you serious?" My husband looked at me fearfully, groaning in a broken voice. "Why did you lie?" "Well, you see, my sis was the one lying to me." Unbelievably, my husband continued his desperate excuses. "Yeah, my sis has always tested me like this. I rushed home, but she wasn't there. I was tricked. I'm a victim too. My sis loves me too much, so she does this kind of thing sometimes." The moment my husband said this in a rush, my sister-in-law appeared in front of him, shouting, "That's enough for you!" My sister-in-law yelled. She had been listening to all of my husband's lies. Then she threw a stack of documents at my husband. Seeing a single sheet of paper flutter towards him, my husband's expression changed to panic, and he desperately grabbed it. "How did this?" It was a photo from the private investigator my sister-in-law had hired to investigate his infidelity. It turns out my husband was having an affair with a wealthy woman he met while working at the old garden center. The woman's name was Rachel, and she was apparently a shareholder in several companies. On the day I had lunch with my sister-in-law, after that phone call from my husband, I went to the garden center where he worked at my sister-in-law's suggestion. Surprisingly, it turned out that my husband had lied about me having an accident to take time off. Moreover, according to the manager, my husband had a poor work attitude and was causing problems with women. Apparently, he had been hitting on female customers indiscriminately. One of the young female customers was so shocked that she complained to the manager. However, my husband didn't listen to the manager's warning and just brushed it off. The reason my husband came home in such a hurry today was that he had been contacted by the manager about being fired. Actually, during that lunch, my sister-in-law told me about my husband's secrets. Since he was handsome from a young age, he was careless with women, and during his student days, he had multiple relationships that caused endless trouble, and my sister-in-law and father-in-law had to clean up after him many times. "That kid never listened to our advice," my sister-in-law said with a deep sigh. As a student, my husband used his good looks and baby face to stimulate others' protective instincts. And after being abandoned by many women, he didn't work and just fooled around. My sister-in-law knew this fact, and my husband wanted to hide it, so he tried to keep me and my sister-in-law estranged. This time, the stay at his parents' house was also a lie. It was actually a trip with his wealthy mistress, Rachel. My sister-in-law had always been concerned about the family and had hired a private investigator to monitor my husband's behavior just in case, but she felt guilty towards him. This was because my husband didn't have enough money for college tuition, and it was used for his mother's treatment when she got cancer. As a result, my husband went to college on a scholarship. His father and sister were repaying the scholarship on his behalf, but my husband failed to find a job and made them pay off his debts. My sister-in-law decided she had been spoiling him and stopped repaying his college debt, telling him to repay it himself. "We've paid back enough for your mom's treatment costs, so pay back the rest yourself. My husband started to panic when he heard this. Wait a minute. Like I just said, I lost my job. And now Emily's talking about divorce. I'm in trouble. My husband sought help from his sister, but she refused. It's not too late to get a job and pay it back yourself. At his sister's harsh words, my husband started crying like a child. Then, with a refreshed expression, my sister-in-law let out a big sigh and invited someone into the house. I'll take care of little Jason. The person who appeared saying this was Rachel, the wealthy mistress. She comforted my crying husband in a sweet voice and gently helped him up. Come with me, Jason dear. Not these women, I'll take care of you. I'm wealthy, and with stocks and investments, we can live a stable life. You'll be happy with me, she said, inviting my husband. I felt a visceral disgust at that sickeningly sweet voice. As if reading my emotions, the mistress turned around and said in a sing-song voice with a grin, Don't worry, I'll pay child support. When she declared this, my husband joyfully knelt before her, repeating words of gratitude. Thank you, Rachel. I'm really grateful. I felt a strong revulsion at this scene, and it made me so sick to my stomach. It seems my sister-in-law had similar feelings, as she silently handed over my husband's belongings and kicked them out of the house. We looked at each other in silence. Whatever fate awaits my husband now is no longer our concern. But surely, he's gonna have the worst time of his life. 10 years later, I was heading to a restaurant to celebrate my son's college acceptance when I was surprised by the sudden appearance of my ex-husband, who had aged beyond recognition. His hair was completely white, his eyes were full of dark circles, his back was hunched, and he looked far older than his actual age. Then my ex-husband began to speak tearfully. Life with Rachel was hell. She was incredibly controlling and practically kept me under house arrest in a high-rise condo. I could barely go out, and she took away all my means of communication. My ex-husband continued, trembling. She was always saying, I bought you, and I couldn't defy her. I shuddered hearing those words. My feeling of disgust back then had been spot on. My husband's once handsome face had completely aged from the harsh life, and his charm had vanished. In the end, it seems he was abandoned by his mistress, kicked out of the high-rise, couldn't find work, and had been struggling to make ends meet. He happened to see Emily while wandering the streets. Saying this, he started pressing me for reconciliation. Emily, why don't we start over? I just snapped at that brazen proposal. Sorry to keep you waiting, Emily. Before I could say anything, my sister-in-law, who I had an appointment with, called out cheerfully. Huh, sis? My ex-husband looked up in surprise. My sister-in-law had started a business after the divorce, and she had headhunted me for her new design office. Emily, why don't you work with me? I've opened a design office. I can't pay much at first, but I'd be really happy if you could work hard with me. My sister-in-law proposed with expectant eyes. There was a strong determination in my sister-in-law's eyes, shining so brightly. Seeing that, I decided to trust her. And indeed, my sister-in-law's words were true. We worked together to grow the company to where it is now. My ex-husband, unaware of this, was seeking help from his biological child who suddenly appeared. Sis, help me out. That's right, there should be some of Dad's inheritance for me too, right? My ex-husband started saying shamelessly. My sister-in-law gave him a cold look as if she was seeing something unpleasant and spat out her words. You didn't even show up at Dad's funeral. There's no way you'd have any inheritance. Dad's will says not to give you anything, and your share goes to the grandkids. Actually, after the divorce, I met my father-in-law again and made up for lost time with him and the grandkids, which we'd missed due to my ex-husband's lies. My father-in-law was overjoyed by our visits and left an inheritance for the kids' future. Hearing about this will from my sister-in-law, my ex-husband nearly collapsed, but when he heard the inheritance would go to the kids, he had the nerve to press me for remarriage again. The kids need a father, right? So let's start over. As my ex-husband was about to say this, a young, energetic male voice interrupted him. Seeing this man who suddenly appeared, my ex-husband flinched for a moment. It was because the man was younger and more handsome than him. "Who's that?" my ex-husband asked in a trembling voice. My sister-in-law answered slowly, with a strange smile. "Who else could it be?" Then she looked at me and smiled meaningfully. "Let me introduce you. This is the new husband." I froze for a moment, then nodded deeply. Yes, he's definitely the new husband, I told my ex-husband, while quietly muttering in my mind. Though it's my sister-in-law's husband. While my sister-in-law and I were speaking with hidden meanings, my ex-husband couldn't take it anymore and ran away crying. He had misunderstood that the man who suddenly appeared was my new husband. After that, my ex-husband never showed up in front of us again. Rumor has it that he's living like a homeless person, doing day labor jobs. I'm no longer connected to my ex-husband, and my sister-in-law has completely cut ties with him too. The kids don't even think of him as their father anymore. We probably won't have anything to do with him again. The path he chose was his own undoing. Later, my sister-in-law said she wanted to introduce me to someone she liked. It was her husband's younger brother. "I want to be sisters with you again, Emily." I smiled wryly but was somehow looking forward to it. And my sister-in-law's husband's brother turned out to be a really nice, kind person, and quite handsome like her husband. Apparently, he'd also had a painful marriage experience where his wife cheated on him. So we hit it off right away. Recently, we've been enjoying meals and dates in between our work schedules. I don't know if it'll lead to marriage, but I want to enjoy this happy situation we're in now. Long time no see. Still childless? Guess you're just defective since you can't even show off a grand kid. Even though there's been a lot between Susan and me in the past, looking back, it still feels like my guts are boiling with anger. After all, the harassment for not being able to have children has been too much. I don't know how badly she wanted grandchildren, but blaming me 100% for not being able to have children is something I really wish she'd stop. To think there are people who would say something as awful as calling someone defective, in a way, it's almost impressive. I'm at the park right now. And I'm not alone. They're right over there. The look on Susan's face when I said that. The grandchild she must have been so desperately wanting to see was right there. But reality is cruel. She hasn't realized that what she's done will come back to her, how blissfully unaware she is. It's about time she realizes. I won't let her forget now. I'm Rachel, a 45-year-old housewife. I love children, which led me to earn a teaching license at university, and I worked as a teacher at a public elementary school. Being a teacher had its tough moments, but the joy of being involved in the children's growth made me feel like it was my true calling. I was devoted to my job, but one day, a childhood friend introduced me to someone. That was how I met Simon, my husband. Simon was 25 at the time. He had graduated from college and was working as a teacher at a middle school. He seemed to struggle with finding opportunities to meet people. Being busy with work at the middle school. He hadn't dated much, focused on his studies through college. He had talked to a friend about wanting to try dating, which led to the introduction. When I was introduced to Simon by my friend, I wasn't seeing anyone and was focused on my work. So, I wasn't too keen on the idea, but since my friend had gone through the trouble of setting it up, I thought I might as well meet him once. I remember that day clearly. We had arranged to meet at a cafe, but he was quite late. I thought to myself, if he doesn't show up in the next 30 minutes, I'll leave. Just then, I saw someone running into the cafe. "I'm so sorry for making you wait." Simon arrived, out of breath, looking like he could barely stand. "No, it's okay. I was just starting to worry, that's all. Actually, one of my students asked me for book recommendations. We got so caught up talking about it that I lost track of time." Hearing his response, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. At the same time, it was clear to me that he wasn't a bad person. Someone who could get that excited about books with a student must be well loved. and imagining Simon getting so involved in recommending books to a student that he forgot our meeting made him seem all the more endearing. I'm sorry for laughing so much when we've just met. I want to know more about you. Do you? Seeing your smile made me feel like my nerves just disappeared. You were nervous? Yes. Well, I didn't expect to meet such a wonderful woman, Simon said, somewhat shyly. Come on. I'm almost 35, you know? I'm probably quite a bit older than you. I'm 25 now, but age doesn't matter to me. From there, Simon and I got to know each other better. His passion for work, his kindness towards others, and most importantly, the respect he had from his students became very clear. It seemed Simon thought highly of me too. It hasn't been long since we met, but I'd regret it if I didn't say this now. Would you consider dating me with marriage in mind? Simon looked at me, his face turning red. I had already made up my mind. If it's with you, I think we can build a good relationship. Spending time with Simon was always enjoyable. Even outside of our dates, I found myself wanting to be with him more. Then, Simon proposed. Ever since I met you, Rachel, I've thought how nice it would be to be together forever. Will you marry me? Yes. I feel like I can be happy with you, Simon. I didn't hesitate with my answer. We met each other's parents and decided to get married, Simon and I. The idea of marrying the person I love and living together was something I couldn't have imagined a while ago. When getting married, we discussed our future work and the possibility of having children. One of the reasons I fell for Simon was because he genuinely respected my thoughts and life choices. I want to continue working even after we get married. Above all, I love my current job as a teacher. I've always felt that about you, Rachel. But what about kids? I'd like to have them if possible, but I want to respect your decision when it comes to actually having them. Of course, I want children too. It might be hard balancing work and family, but I hope we can start trying for a baby soon. Simon and I agreed to try for a baby within our capabilities while continuing our jobs. Such things are blessings, after all, and not entirely within our control. However, we were oblivious to the brewing storm in our peaceful life. I'm heading out for work. Got it. You'll be back by dinner, right? Take care. After seeing Simon off, I was having coffee alone in the living room when the doorbell rang. Hello, Rachel. Hello, Susan. Simon's at school for sport practice. What's up? Then, Susan, Simon's mother and thus my mother-in-law, seemed disappointed for a moment but quickly turned to face me and blurted out. It's almost a year since you got married, isn't it? Yes, thanks to you. That's not what I mean. Before taking care of other people's children, you should have your own. If you can't even manage that, you might as well quit your job. Susan looked at me with frustration, as if her message wasn't getting across. That's quite sudden to say. Isn't it about time? Or were you planning to wait until you're in a stable condition? Are you talking about having a baby? You are 35, right? It's normal to have 2 or 3 kids by now. The sudden inquiry about children took me aback. But this isn't something I can control at will, so I decided to be honest. Simon and I have talked about it, and we'll let you know as soon as there's good news. What are you talking about so carelessly? I can't understand how you can be so laid back about this. I was puzzled by her increasingly anxious demeanor, considering she seemed calm when we met before our marriage. I'm sorry if I make you feel something. But this isn't something I can manage on my own. So, what? Are you saying it's Simon's fault? As she said that, Susan stormed into the room. Then, from inside, I heard Susan's voice. What's this machine? I bumped my foot against it. I'm sorry. That's an air purifier. An air purifier? This big? I have a dust allergy, so I'm extra careful about air quality. I'm sensitive to house dust, and it can make me sneeze uncontrollably. It's also for keeping the air clean. Sorry if it's in the way. Susan let out a huge sigh. Huh? Are you saying you're coddling yourself? Coddling, you say? That's right. You're making your body weaker by fussing over dust and garbage. If you need fresh air, just open a window. Unfortunately, we live on the second floor of an apartment in a busy area, where exhaust fumes are a concern. Well, but with the exhaust gas, we can't really open the windows much. Relying on such a nonsensical machine. That's why you can't have kids. Susan looked at me as if she was absolutely certain she was right. If you really want children, come to my house next week. Yeah, but... It's fine. My husband isn't around, and I'm the only one there, so it won't bother anyone. The thought of going there made me feel gloomy. Next week, I visited Susan's house. Come this way. Susan took my hand and led me into the living room. As soon as I entered, a strange scent hit my nose. Excuse me, but this smell. I was at a loss for words to describe the strange aroma when a cup that seemed to contain tea was presented to me. Here. This tea is supposed to be good for your health and make it easier to get pregnant. Am I supposed to drink this? What about you, Susan? I'm not drinking it. They say good medicine tastes bitter, so I'm being harsh for your own good. Susan declared, pushing a bag resembling paper into my purse as I struggled with the bizarre color and smell of the tea, which seemed undrinkable. What is this? Don't go through someone's bag like that. Don't talk to me like I'm a thief. This tea, if you drink 4 cups a day, it's supposed to be effective. And next, there's this. Susan continued, pulling me towards the yard where I saw a mountain of laundry. What's with all the laundry? I asked, puzzled by the sight of gauze towels, tiny clothes, and bibs that clearly weren't Susan's. A friend gave them to me. Touching and washing children's things supposedly makes pregnancy more likely. It's also good practice for when you have a child. She explained, bringing out a large tub as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Washing with all your heart is said to welcome a child into your womb. She added before leaving me alone with my disbelief. Simon and I indeed wanted children and discussed waiting without stress for the right time. Yet here was Susan, pushing bizarre practices on us. Frustrated but unable to leave without doing anything. I washed and hung the children's clothes as told. Susan, I'm done. Then come back the day after tomorrow and wash like you did today. But I have work. Work? You can find time before or after work if you really want children. She countered, pushing me to the limits of my patience. Out of sheer stubbornness, I followed Susan's instructions. Washing unknown children's clothes by hand in the cold night air, leading to severely chapped hands despite using hand cream. What happened to your hands? Simon asked with concern, hesitant to share the truth about his mother's outdated superstitions. I eventually told him about Susan's belief that hand-washing children's clothes could lead to pregnancy. Additionally, since Simon also expressed a desire for children, I was worried about speaking ill of his mother. Actually, your mom has been asking if we have children yet. She told me that hand-washing children's clothes could make it easier to get pregnant, so I've been going to her house every other day to wash them. At this, Simon looked at me with disbelief, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. What? She really thinks that'll work? Simon pondered for a moment before speaking with a sense of resolve. I'll talk to Mom, so you don't have to go over there anymore. Actually, Mom said she's going to try living on her own since there's some inheritance from Dad, and she wouldn't cling to her son or grandchildren. And I'm going to see a doctor. Why the doctor? Because pregnancy isn't just about the woman, right? Maybe the problem lies with me. It's better to know. He explained, his reliability shining through. He always considered my troubles as his own. Thank you, but don't overdo it. It's for you, Rachel. Staying silent while this is happening would be harder. He reassured me. Yet, Susan's behavior didn't change as expected. I've spoken to Mom. You don't have to visit her house anymore. Thank you. I'm sorry to make you do this, Simon. Don't worry about it. Turns out, the difficulty in having kids might be because of me. Simon admitted with a hint of regret. But the doctor said it should be fine with medication and regular visits. We'll see how it goes, and if nothing changes, we'll think about it again. It seemed like the issue was resolved, but it wasn't over yet. Susan, however, didn't take this well. Despite Simon's efforts to intervene, she sent a package filled with books on pregnancy and a letter expressing her anger, misunderstanding her persistence for concern. The books were about pregnancy and parenting, showing significant signs of wear. Honestly, I harbored mixed feelings of anger and disbelief towards Susan for going this far. When I shared this with Simon, it seemed he felt the same way. Even though I told her to stop, she's still doing this? What should we do with these books? Even if she tells us to read them, honestly. Mom must be so desperate for a grandchild she's not seeing clearly anymore. I'm really sorry for putting you through this, Simon expressed, choosing his words carefully after some thought. It's undoubtedly a tough spot for him, being caught between me and his mother. She is my mother, but the person I want to protect the most is my wife, Rachel. If it comes to hurting you carelessly, I'll need to reconsider our relationship with her. But even so, she's still your mother, right? I don't want you to have any regrets if something happens. We might have to attend family functions, but beyond that, we don't need to interact more than necessary. I'm really sorry for not realizing this sooner. I'm sorry for all this, Simon apologized. Simon and I agreed to minimize contact with Susan, setting boundaries for our peace of mind, acknowledging the stress she was causing. Simon has been sending some money to his mother on his own, but since this is a matter between parent and child, I've decided not to say anything about it this time. He understood my decision to limit interactions with his mother. Affirming his priority was our well-being over maintaining unnecessary stress from family expectations. It had been about 10 years since the incident with Susan's problematic behavior. I was leisurely sitting on a bench in the park, enjoying a coffee for the first time in a long while, when I heard a voice from behind. Long time no see. Still childless? You're basically defective for not being able to show off any grandchildren. I didn't recognize who it was at first. But, even though she had gotten much thinner and smaller, it was Susan. It hit me that some people never change, demeaning others as defective right off the bat. Her spiteful gaze made my once warm coffee seem to turn cold and taste bitter, making me realize how much someone's emotions can change their sense of taste. Oh, Susan. Why haven't you shown your face, huh? You haven't been saying unnecessary things to Simon, have you? I never meant anything by it. Susan poked the ground near my feet with her cane and said, "What's the idea behind avoiding your husband's mother to such an extent?" I said as she looked me up and down, oozing sarcasm. Sitting here, drinking your coffee so elegantly in the park, you must feel so good about yourself. She continued, unchanged from the day she demanded I wash a stranger's baby clothes. I had been living peacefully for the last 10 years without running into Susan. I didn't want to see her, but I mustered up the courage and spoke up. "They're right over there." Susan looked momentarily stunned but then burst into laughter, as if the idea of me having a child was the funniest thing. She probably always assumed it was impossible for me. That's why I think she can adopt such an attitude without any qualms. It's her prerogative to believe that happiness comes with having children, but I wish she wouldn't impose her values on others. She then turned serious and glared at me, making me brace for what was coming. "What's this all of a sudden? Aren't you quite a bit older than Simon? No way you could have kids." Certainly, I am older than Simon, but being older doesn't justify the assumption that I can't have children. It's an unfair conclusion, she claimed, ignoring the fact that many couples with age gaps have children all the time. I took a deep breath, ready to speak my mind. "So," when Susan put her finger to my lips to silence me, as if saying I shouldn't say anything more. "You should have just done as I said. Whatever you've told Simon, running away like that. No child would be born to such an accursed person, she declared, her presence imposing. Despite 10 years of estrangement, I felt a genuine threat from her. The thought of being swallowed up by this situation filled me with dread. As I was being lectured by Susan, Anna and Emma came over, looking concerned. Mom? What's happening? Do you know this person? This person is... I hesitated on how to introduce Susan to Anna and Emma. Despite my bitter memories, she was their grandmother. Was it right to separate them based on my feelings? As I was pondering, Anna and Emma have never met Susan, nor have I ever mentioned her, so they would never imagine that she could be their grandmother. Anna and Emma started whispering among themselves, loud enough for me to hear. Anna, do you think this person is? Yeah, Emma, I think so too. She was here the other day as well. They speculated. Susan, pretending not to notice their whispers, moved closer to Anna and Emma, trying to touch them with trembling hands. The girls looked unsure how to react to this stranger extending her hands to them. Could it actually be Simon's children? My grandchildren? Susan moved closer as if it were a touching reunion, despite the girls' clear discomfort at the sudden approach of a stranger they had never met. Then, taking a few steps back, Anna and Emma said to Susan, "You're the nagging grandma from the store, right?" "What do you mean?" "Do you think so too?" "I thought the same." Suddenly, they got excited, and I couldn't follow what was happening. "She's always at the store near our school." "Right. We always see her yelling at the clerks." "What do you mean?" "She's the lady from the store near our school. She's famous for shouting at the clerks, demanding her money back all the time." "Exactly. She only yells at the young people, but when the manager with the name tag is there, she doesn't say anything." I had never heard such stories before, but it was clear she was picking her targets. "It's just that I'm teaching them that they should listen to their elders. I'm doing the right thing." "What?" Anna and Emma looked at me, perhaps thinking I was being unfairly accused by the nagging store grandma. "Mom hasn't done anything wrong. Please stop," they pleaded as Susan pretended not to hear and moved closer. For Susan, this encounter with Anna and Emma might have seemed like a momentous reunion, tears welling up in her eyes. "Are you really my grandchildren? Well, since we've met, let's have a good look at you. Don't come any closer. If anything happens to Mom, we'll hear this," Emma threatened, brandishing a large, brightly colored personal alarm. Susan seemed to shrink back at the sight of the alarm. Anyone would flinch if threatened with a personal alarm being sounded. It's not often that a grandmother is met with her grandchildren brandishing a personal alarm, treating her like a suspicious person. I instinctively moved to ensure their safety, and Susan began to tremble. "What?" It must be a shock to be treated like a stranger by the grandchildren she had longed to meet, I thought, seeing her shake. Susan looked significantly diminished in her state of trembling. However, I was more concerned about something else and decided to confront her further. "According to Anna and Emma, you've been demanding refunds at the store? Why is that?" "Because they're pushing useless stuff on me, and it's causing me trouble," Susan responded, her tone suddenly firm, insisting she had done nothing wrong. I decided to ask what Susan would least want to hear. "Are you having financial difficulties? Is that why you can do such embarrassing things in public?" "Embarrassing? Don't say such disrespectful things to your elders." She snapped back, clearly disliking that I had hit a nerve, her bravado faltering. "But normally, it's embarrassing to act so boldly only towards young clerks. To not feel that embarrassment, well, that's just like you, Susan." "Enough. Shut up." Susan bit back in frustration. Then Anna, with a puzzled expression, said, "This lady always brings out empty containers after eating and yells for a refund." Indeed. Waving around empty containers and shouting was quite an extreme behavior. "What? What do you plan to do with an empty container?" "I don't really know. but they were saying something about a poor old person doing such things. I realized these were the children's words. Are you perhaps struggling with money? Yes. It's terrible to grow old and be in need of money. As far as I can remember, Susan's house was filled with numerous high-end items. She probably spent all of the money from my father-in-law. Living in hardship due to financial trouble must be tough. If you understand, could you send me a little money? $3,000, no, $2,000 would be enough. I avoided Susan's approaching gaze. I must decline. What? After all that you've done, expecting help when you're in trouble is too much. Then, Susan glared at me in frustration. You really are heartless. To not extend a helping hand to a frail old person like me. She looked at me as if she was entitled to help, as usual. But there's no need for that. It's all self-inflicted. How pitiful for these children to be raised by a parent like you. Then, Anna and Emma stood in front of me and said to Susan, We're not pitiful at all. We love our mom, so stop saying mean things. If you say anything more cruel, we'll really go to the police. Susan was speechless at Anna and Emma's sudden retaliation. It must have been shocking for her to be threatened with police by the grandchildren she longed for. If that's how it is, shall I give you what you currently need? Really? Of course. Just wait a moment. I ran to a nearby store and bought something. What's this? Do you think I'm old enough to use this? I placed adult diapers in front of Susan. The package labeled Comfort Care Diapers was enough to intimidate her. Susan's face turned red with anger. You made me wash children's clothes until my hands cracked, saying it was practice for when you have children. Don't you remember? Susan's face became uneasy. After mumbling for a bit, she whispered, That was for your own good, and I wanted grandchildren quickly. All my friends had them, and I was the only one left out. So, it's the same for me. For Susan's sake. Wanting grandchildren just because others have them, are you a child? Susan glared at me resentfully. Treating people as old or as children, you'll see karma. It's convenient for you to do as you please, but not others. Then, Simon's voice came from behind. He happened to see us. You're not still harassing Rachel, are you? Harassment? That sounds so harsh. It was just a little. I explained the recent events to Simon. It seems Susan is out of money. She's been causing trouble at the store. Last time I visited, her house was filled with high-end bags and wallets. Simon's usually calm expression turned stern. Mom, wasn't it a lie that you'd live off Dad's inheritance without bothering us? And didn't you promise not to approach Rachel anymore? Well, running into Rachel was just a coincidence. A coincidence? In such a big park, especially a children's park, running into Rachel by chance, who would believe that? Susan fell silent, hit by Simon's accurate guess. You've been hoarding high-end items, still doing that? Well, I just bought bags and shoes to match the places, and they piled up. I've been sending a little money from my allowance, and you were buying bags and wallets to the point they were rolling around? I told you before to only buy what you need. I feel betrayed. Then Susan clung to Simon. It's all a mistake. A lie. What's mistake? A lie? It's clear you're lying, Mom. Don't contact us anymore. And of course, I won't send any money. Simon turned and walked away without looking back at Susan. Susan collapsed on the spot. Rejected by her own son and unable to recover. If you had just had children sooner. If you had them while I could still see. It's not like I had children for Susan. With that, I left with Anna and Emma, hoping never to see her again. I warned Anna and Emma to be careful of Susan when going to school, but it seems they never encountered her again. One day, we got a call from the hospital. Apparently, a few days after our meeting, Susan tripped and fell at a supermarket step. When asked to pick up Susan from the hospital, I found her shrunken figure in the bed, along with the supermarket manager and a police officer. Susan had a bad fall, breaking her leg. It turned out she had been secretly taking items, and the store had been keeping an eye on her. Well, I don't want to hear any excuses. It's embarrassing, so please don't contact me again. It can't be helped. Simon used to send them to me, but now they're gone. I was stunned and speechless. Also, no matter who I ask for your contact information, no one will answer, so I was feeling lonely. I guess so. Apparently, she was trying her best to get in touch with me again. I must have been asking around hoping someone would tell us where we were. Susan has always believed that anyone will listen to what she says. But I had taken precautions in advance. I told everyone about her actions and about the unpleasant experiences I had experienced in the past, and at the same time asked them not to give out my contact information. I didn't want to imagine meeting a selfish person like her again. So, no one gave her our contact information. I heard that some of them were refusing her calls, so she must have been quite disliked even among her friends. Anyone would definitely keep their distance from such a person. I wasn't particularly surprised when I heard that her calls were being rejected. Susan ends up spending every day alone and feeling lonely while in the hospital. It seems that due to the stress, she has been hitting people at the hospital and is being given strict warning. That's fine for now, but I wonder what will happen in the future. The way she continues to run wild without realizing how much she is hated may be considered typical of her. I am spending happy days with Anna, Emma, and my husband. I wondered what would happen when I ran into Susan in the park, but I'm glad I took the plunge. I'm glad I consulted my husband about all the problems. We worked together to receive treatment and were able to meet the two daughters. I also realized that if we don't value others, it will come back to us. Mom, come here. Come on, Mom. Anna and Emma are looking at me with big smiles. I ran over to catch up with them and gave them a big hug. I want to live my life savoring the happiness of being able to spend happy days like this with Anna, Emma, and my husband. Hey, it seems like the baby wants to say something, said my 8-year-old niece, glancing at my son's face. What? That's nonsense. Babies can't talk. My son laughed off what he thought was child's play. But my sister and I were startled and looked at my niece. The grandson blinked his big eyes several times and looked up at me and my sister as if he had something he wanted to convey. It's true, I can hear this child's voice. My niece insisted, tearfully staring at my son as if conveying the baby's words was her mission, even if my son mocked her. My son's wife watched this scene in astonishment. Then what is he saying? I'll listen, just for you. My son said with a condescending look. It wasn't a look one should give a small child. I swallowed hard, watching anxiously for what my niece would say next. My name is Tina. I am 50 years old, living with my husband and our beloved dog, Laura. Until 7 years ago, we lived with my son, Ken, and Laura, but after graduating from community college, Ken started working at a factory and moved out to live on his own. Ken was always rebellious, often not listening to what we said. No matter how much my strict husband warned him, he wouldn't listen, and there were times he got into trouble with the police. Each time, my husband and I would apologize repeatedly, sternly lecturing Ken. But it seemed neither the unpleasant experiences he caused others nor the police warnings bothered Ken, as he repeatedly got into similar troubles. As a child, he was like the neighborhood ringleader, bossing around his elementary school friends, which was still somewhat endearing. As he grew older, his delinquency escalated, causing injuries and troubles to others, leaving us, his parents, at our wits' end. We were worried about him until he graduated from community college. However, upon graduation, he landed a job at a company, and we were overjoyed, thinking Ken had finally turned into a decent person. Becoming a working adult, whether due to being busy or changing his ways, the calls from the police stopped. Living on his own, Ken seemed to have mended his ways. Finally, after years of difficult parenting, my husband and I congratulated each other. 2 years ago, Ken brought home the woman he wanted to marry, Lisa. At that time, Ken, at 25, was on the younger side for marriage, but we never thought the delinquent boy would ever get married, so we were overjoyed at his announcement. "This is Lisa, the woman I'm gonna marry. Met her in town." "Nice to meet you, I'm Lisa," said the woman Ken brought home, a slender beauty with a modest demeanor, stepping back behind Ken. "I'm Tina, Ken's mother." "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too." It was a mystery why such a lady fell for Ken, but perhaps he had a charming side we hadn't seen. "We're planning to get married next month," Ken reported lightly, but his usual confidence meant my husband and I didn't pry. If they had decided together, it wasn't our place to intervene. So, at work the other day, Ken quickly moved on the topic to ramble about his work. Most of it was boasting about how he had saved his workplace from crises or covered for his colleagues' misdemeanors. We half listened, but Lisa attentively nodded along the whole time. Indeed, if a woman listens to this well, it's understandable why Ken fell for her. Despite coming to report their marriage, Ken mostly talked about himself, impressing Lisa. In the end, Ken's marriage announcement turned out to be mostly him rambling on about whatever he wanted to talk about. When Ken went to the restroom, I couldn't help but ask Lisa if she was okay. "Are you okay, Lisa?" "He talks mostly about himself." "Oh, I'm used to it, so it's fine." Lisa reassured me, replied like that as if it was nothing. "If there's anything, please always feel free to talk to us. We're family now." "Thank you." Her eyes were slightly teary, which surprised me. "Oh, sorry. Just some dust," Lisa said, wiping the corner of her eye. She might be experiencing the wedding blues. I remembered feeling choked up when I reported my marriage to my in-laws long ago. That day, I watched Lisa leave our house with a nostalgic feeling. To think Ken found such a wife, we can finally relax. "Yeah, it's been a long journey, but we made it." We congratulated each other on the upbringing of our son, and that night, we celebrated with some fine wine, getting drunker than usual and going to bed early. 2 years had passed since Ken and Lisa got married, and this year, they had a baby boy. His name is Henry, and from the photos, he looks like Lisa with a well-defined face. The thing is, my husband and I haven't met our grandson yet. Even when we contacted Ken to let us see the grandson, he'd say, "I've been busy lately," or "Lisa doesn't like it," and hardly agreed. Initially, we refrained from visiting right after the birth to not burden Lisa, but after several months without approval from Ken, my husband and I decided to visit Ken and Lisa's home unannounced. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon. Hello. Ken and Lisa lived in a rental property in the countryside, about a 40-minute drive from our house. Lisa opened the door. "It's been a while. How are you?" Seeing Lisa after a long time, she seemed to have a frightened expression for some reason. She appeared thinner than before. Or perhaps more accurately, gaunt. "Sorry for the sudden visit. We just couldn't wait any longer to see our grandson. Is now a good time?" "Oh, yes. Please come in." Despite asking tentatively, thinking it might be a busy time, Lisa readily let us in. As soon as we entered, the smell of cigarettes hit our noses. My husband frowned. I was surprised, thinking, cigarette smell in a house with a baby? But didn't mention it and proceeded to the back of the room. Seeing our grandson sleeping in the baby crib in the living room, our cheeks relaxed. When we gently touched his small hand, he twitched but continued sleeping. "He's adorable." "Thank you," Lisa said with a tired face that slightly brightened. "Is Ken not here today?" "He went out with friends today." "Leaving you and Henry behind?" "It's usual for him." Usual must mean Ken often goes out on his days off. "Is Ken helping with parenting?" "I smelled cigarettes. Is Ken smoking?" Lisa just looked down without answering, affirming the situation, and I felt very sad. "I'll talk to him. Tell him to help you out more." "Please don't." Hearing her firm refusal, I was taken aback. Despite Lisa being so worn out from childcare and housework, I thought of warning Ken, but perhaps for Lisa, it's unwanted interference? Oh, no. I appreciate the thought, but he might think I complained. Oh. Lisa was worried that if I complained to Ken, it would be her who'd be blamed. But that would be tough on you, Lisa. I'm fine. So please don't say anything to him. With Lisa insisting so much, neither my husband nor I could say anything more. All right, but please talk to us if anything comes up. We want to help. Thank you. Actually, Lisa was raised in a single mother's home, and her mother is currently hospitalized due to illness. So, for Lisa, aside from Ken, my husband and I are the only family she can rely on. We wanted to help Lisa feel a bit more at ease. Afterward, as Lisa sporadically shared about Ken's sloppy lifestyle and his terrible attitude towards her, it pained us to hear. We hadn't known that Ken was being so awful to Lisa while we were not around. Although Lisa refused, we secretly resolved to warn Ken if he continued behaving terribly. A week after my husband and I visited Lisa, on a Saturday when my husband said he had to work, my sister Sarah and my 8-year-old niece Ivy came to visit. Sarah and I have been close since childhood, and even as adults, we often spend time together like this. But this time, it had been a while since we last met, about half a year since I saw my sister, Sarah. Sarah and her daughter, Ivy, came to our house, and first off, they petted our beloved dog, Laura. Ivy, who apparently doesn't usually interact with dogs, looked at Laura with curiosity as Sarah said, "Isn't she adorable?" To which Ivy solemnly nodded. Then, I served tea to Sarah and Ivy, and we caught up on each other's lives. Unlike me, a stay-at-home wife, Sarah works part-time and was venting about her boss. This must be one of the few times she can relieve her stress. I listened to Sarah's stories, nodding appropriately. During this, Ivy, who had been playing with Laura, suddenly turned to us and stared at me with her big eyes. "What's wrong, Ivy?" Then, Ivy started, as if she had something on her mind. "Laura says, thank you for always taking care of me. But she wants more frequent washes, not just once a month but maybe once a week." "Really?" I was baffled as Ivy began to express Laura's feelings. Looking at Sarah, she was just as surprised, saying, "Well, it's common for young children to pretend to converse with animals, but specifying the frequency of the baths was peculiar. Especially since it was accurate. I've been wanting to give Laura more frequent baths, but I've been too busy lately." "Did Laura tell you that, Ivy?" "Yeah, she looked like she wanted to talk, so I asked her." At first, I thought Ivy was either lying or fantasizing. However, I was taken aback when Sarah mentioned, actually, this kind of thing happens quite often with her. Last time, despite the weather forecast predicting sunshine, she said a storm was coming and it'd be better to stay home. We had no plans that day, so we stayed in, and sure enough, the weather turned severe, just as Ivy said. Signs were even blown away outside. I was glad we didn't go out. "Really?" And there's more. She found my car keys right away when I lost them and talked with dogs we met while walking, just like now. No one believes it, but I've come to realize this child has a special gift. Sarah continued, patting Ivy's head. If what Sarah said was true, I too had to believe Ivy had some unique ability. Despite finding it unbelievable, witnessing this power firsthand left me no choice but to believe. Ivy, having relayed Laura's feelings, went back to playing with her as usual. "And how about you? How have things been lately?" Sarah turned to ask me as I recalled last week's events while watching Ivy. "Actually, I met my grandson for the first time the other day." I began, sharing everything I saw at Ken and Lisa's house. How Ken left his wife and child at home to hang out alone on Sunday, his smoking habit, and his domineering attitude towards Lisa. With each detail I shared, Sarah's brows furrowed more and more. "That's terrible. Ken has always been a handful, but I thought he had gotten better recently." "Yes, but it seems I was mistaken. It's just not right for Lisa." "Indeed, and worrying. How about we go visit Lisa together next time? Maybe we can help somehow. Of course, we'll let her know beforehand." "All right, I'll ask her." The following weekend, Sarah, Ivy, and I visited Ken and Lisa's house again. After notifying Lisa in advance, it turned out Ken was out again, which was just as well. However, I couldn't help but disapprove of Ken leaving his family alone almost every weekend.
Hello, Lisa. Sorry for visiting again. It's okay. It's just me and the baby, so any time is fine.
Hello. Sarah and Ivy greeted Lisa for the first time in 2 years since we last met as extended family. Ivy rushed over to the crib where my grandson was lying, gently stroking his head. She seemed to like the baby. As we watched Ivy, we sat down at the dining table. Lisa looked even more exhausted from childcare and housework than before, prompting concerned looks from Sarah.
Has Ken's behavior changed since then?
It hasn't changed.
When I try to go out, he yells at me to stay in the house, and he does whatever he wants, like drinking and smoking. If I even slightly resist, he says, "Who do you think is earning the bread for you guys?"
Lisa shared, tears brimming in her eyes as she spoke about her daily life. Sarah offered Lisa a handkerchief.
Are you okay? I can't believe it. Makes me want to do something about it.
I was so angry at Ken's appalling behavior that I couldn't stand it.
It would be nice if we could find something on him, something that could get the police involved.
Sarah muttered. Hearing this, Lisa gasped.
It's not about the police, but lately, we've had debt collectors come to our house. Since my husband wasn't home, I told them they must have the wrong person, but they said, "This is Ken's house, right?"
Really? That happened? It's hard to ask, but Lisa, do you have debts?
No, I have no idea about any debts. This house is rented, and we don't have any loans.
Sarah and I exchanged looks, wondering what was going on. Was Ken in debt without Lisa knowing, unable to pay it back? While we were swirling with questions and searching for the right words to respond. What a loss today, just my luck. We heard Ken's voice as the front door was roughly opened. Everyone's face froze as we heard Ken's voice. Huh? Why is Mom here? Ken glared at me, reminding me of his rebellious and delinquent days.
I'm sorry for intruding unannounced. But I was worried about Lisa.
Ken was startled not only by my presence but also by his aunt and cousin being there. However, realizing it was just family, he demanded Lisa to bring him some alcohol. Lisa hurried to the kitchen.
There's no more beer left.
What? That's your job as a wife to restock.
I'm sorry.
Ken retorted arrogantly, as if he were a king, and Lisa shrunk in response, apologizing. I couldn't help but shout, "Ken," but he didn't even glance at me, just glared at Lisa. Looking for a way to reprimand Ken, the baby in the crib began to cry. Lisa looked startled and started to move towards the baby, but Ken's fierce glare stopped her in her tracks. Sarah and I exchanged looks, trying to communicate silently about what to do next. That's when Ivy spoke up.
Hey, the baby seems to have something to say.
Ivy said this while glancing at Ken's face. What?
That's nonsense.
Babies can't talk. Ken laughed off what he thought was just child's play. But Sarah and I turned to look at Ivy's face in astonishment. The grandchild blinked his big eyes several times, looking up at us as if he had something he wanted to say.
It's not a lie, I can hear this child's voice.
Ivy insisted, undeterred by being ridiculed by Ken. Tears welling up in her eyes as she stared at him. Lisa watched in astonishment.
Then what is he saying? I'll listen, just for you.
Ken said with a disdainful look that should never be directed at a small child. I watched, holding my breath, as Ivy was about to speak next.
Daddy is planning something bad. Mommy, don't be fooled.
For a moment, Ken's shoulder twitched at Ivy's words. Lisa looked shocked. Sarah and I immediately understood that Ivy was about to use her mysterious ability again. What do you mean, Ivy? I urged her to elaborate. Ivy took a breath before continuing.
Daddy has been writing secrets in a notebook and always hides it behind the bookshelf. Also, I love Mommy. Daddy is scary, and he's crying.
Then Ivy walked over to the living room's bookshelf, pulled out a few books, and found a small notebook hidden behind them, handing it to Sarah.
Here it is.
Seeing the small notebook, Ken's face turned pale. Sarah, gauging the reactions of Ken and Lisa, opened the notebook. This is a life insurance policy. Oh, the insured is Lisa, and Ken is the beneficiary. There's even a contract attached. Now Lisa's face turned pale, and I took the notebook from Sarah to see for myself. As Sarah said, there was a life insurance policy worth over $200,000 taken out on Lisa, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Ken, what's this all about? I never thought my son, who had a history of delinquency, could do something so cruel to his own wife. I glared at him, wanting to confront him about this life insurance right away. Damn, I had no choice. I ran out of money. Besides, anyone would get life insurance, right? It's not like I was planning to do anything to Lisa. Ken rattled off excuses as if trying to justify himself. The fact he mentioned not having money was corroborated by the debt story I heard from Lisa. It was clear where the money had gone, considering how he leaves his wife and child to hang out every day. Probably wasted it on some frivolous activities. Insurance is usually something you get for yourself, right? Taking out a life insurance policy on Lisa without her knowing and acting ignorant about it is just wrong. My logical point left Ken at a loss for words. Then, Ivy spoke up again, adding fuel to the fire. The baby told me. Daddy's been mumbling to himself that he got fired from his job for stealing money from the company. And he's planning to do something bad to Mommy to get money. What? I exclaimed, shocked by her words. Fired from his job? Then what had he been doing all this time during weekdays? Lisa, too, stared at Ken in disbelief. What are you talking about? You don't have any proof. Ken spat back at Ivy. I stepped in front of Ivy, unleashing all the anger I had been holding back. Proof? Ivy just told you everything. She can understand the baby's words, not just that. Finding this notebook wasn't a coincidence either. What Ivy says is true. You've seen the life insurance policy with your own eyes. Stop making excuses and apologize to Lisa. I scolded Ken more fiercely than ever, heartbroken to know my son could attempt such a terrible thing against his wife. Ken, who had boasted about covering for his subordinates' misconduct, was actually the one causing trouble. It was disheartening and made me feel nauseous to think my own son could sink so low. What the hell? Ken ruffled his hair, twisting his face in frustration. But it was all his own doing. No one felt sympathy for him. After I scolded Ken, Lisa seemed to gather some courage and finally spoke up. I never imagined you could do something so despicable. I want nothing to do with you anymore. Pay back the debt yourself. Goodbye. With those words, Lisa took the baby and stormed out of the house. We watched in astonishment. Ken muttered complaints after Lisa left, but after being rebuked by Sarah and me, he ended up sulking. Though it was unexpected for Lisa to leave, I was glad we could expose Ken's wrongdoing. Looking at Ivy, who seemed content after speaking her mind, she stretched and said, I'm hungry. Shall we go get something to eat? Well, we'll be taking our leave now. With that, Sarah, Ivy, and I left Ken's house behind. A place that could be visited by debt collectors at any moment. I decided never to return to this house again, not just for Lisa's sake. Why the hell? Ken was still shouting until we closed the door, but we ignored his pathetic cries and left the building. A few days later, worried about Lisa, I contacted her. I'm sorry to have worried you. I've gone back to my grandmother's house. Please feel free to visit Henry anytime, she assured me, which relieved me. Lisa had sent Ken divorce papers right after that incident. Ken was reluctant to agree to the divorce at first, but after Lisa insisted she would not let him see the child unless they divorced, he finally gave in, and the divorce was settled. Lisa, whose mother is hospitalized, said she's back at her grandparents' seeking employment and plans to place Henry in daycare soon. Ken's miserable days began, forced to work part-time daily to repay his debts. Initially, he begged my husband for money, but after hearing the full story, my husband was furious and told him, "Don't ever come back home." Thankfully, that meant Ken no longer sought help from us. I don't feel sorry for him. He brought this upon himself. Now, I occasionally visit Lisa and her grandparents' house to play with Henry. Despite everything that happened because of Ken, Lisa and her family have warmly welcomed Sarah, Ivy, and me. Ivy, do you know what Henry just said? Yeah. I'm happy I can play with Mommy and Grandma. Really? That's great. Lisa was just oppressed by Ken. She's actually a kind and polite, wonderful person. That's why she still treats us without any discrimination. For me, that was enough.